A few weeks ago, we broke down the top 7 best Pixar movies, so now the time has come for us to take a closer look at the competition. Dreamworks. Founded by people who split off from Disney, most notably Jeffery Katzenberg and also Steven Spielberg, they made big waves on the animation market pretty much instantly. Quick bit of housekeeping, similar to that list, we will be limiting ourselves to one movie per franchise, which will make a bigger impact here than it did on the Pixar list, simply because Dreamworks did more sequels. But as we'll see, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Here we go. I'm Adrian, and this is the top 7 best Dreamworks movies. Number 7, Wallace and Gromit, Curse of the Were-Rabbit. Let's get the obvious thing out of the way here. Yes, the title is kind of silly, but that's almost the point. This movie is supposed to be a little bit silly. That's what makes it endearing. The story of a quirky inventor and his hyper-intelligent yet mute dog looking to solve a mystery on the eve of a major contest is a great framework. The fact that your suspension of disbelief is already stretched so far, when it introduces things like brainwashing rabbits so that they stop stealing the villagers' vegetables, it feels funny and not out of place. And let's not forget the animation on this one. Claymation is rare enough that when you do see it, it's always worth taking note of, and it's great here. Just the sheer effort required to make an hour and a half of stop-motion animation by hand is impressive, and that's unfortunately also the reason you don't see it very much anymore. It provides so much room for creativity, and this movie really takes advantage of its unique style to make something that's guaranteed to stick with you for years to come. Number 6, Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron. If I had to sum up this movie in one word, it would be bold. The number of animated movies where the animals don't talk and they're also the main character is pretty much just this one. Even if it hadn't worked, I would have respected this movie for trying. But the good news is that it does work. There's a narration by Matt Damon, which is a slightly random choice, but considering the time, Matt Damon was pretty popular back then. But the fact that they have the good sense to keep that to the bare minimum required to follow the story means that it never gets on your nerves. This movie knows when to just let the animation and expressions do the talking. In some ways, the story of painting the Native Americans to be more in tune with nature while the white man just wants to make it work for profit is kind of overdone, but with the twist of telling it from the perspective of nature, it feels fresh. Speaking of nature, this movie has absolutely gorgeous scenery in its animation. I mentioned how much it relies on the animation to bring across how the characters are feeling, but that doesn't include how incredible the background animation is. It really goes out of its way to make the Old West seem gorgeous, and it succeeds with flying colors in that aspect. This was back in the day when blending CG imagery with 2D animation was by no means a guaranteed success, but this is one of the most impressive attempts up to this point in time. The music is a bit more polarizing. You're either going to love it or hate it, but that call I can't make for you. That's kind of the entire movie though. It's not for everyone, but even if it isn't, it still deserves to be respected. Number 5, Chicken Run. The other big one of the Dreamworks claymation movies, and this is the better one. Helmed by the same director as Wallace and Gromit, Nick Park, and in collaboration with the same studio, Aardman Animations, it shouldn't come as a surprise that this one is of comparable quality. It's genuinely impressive how the animation is so smooth, knowing that it all had to be done by hand, but at the same time, it tells a good story with interesting characters. The chickens trying to escape from the evil farmer who wants to turn them all into pies is maybe a bit old hat, but at the same time told with a refreshing angle of slapstick. The idea of making the chicken pen into a plane is just so surreal it's funny. Even though it doesn't have a ton of huge names in the voice cast, Mel Gibson being the most noteworthy one, there's such an earnest edge to their performance, you can't help but love them. To be fair, this is a fairly difficult movie to write about because a lot of its strength come from the jokes, and it's hard to write about those without just giving the jokes away. It's also the highest grossing claymation movie ever made, though with how few there have been since then, that's kind of to be expected. Either way, Chicken Run is an endlessly entertaining movie with stellar animation, and that's enough to earn it the number 5 spot on this list. Number 4, Kung Fu Panda 2. Deciding which one is better, this one or its predecessor, is tough. Both feature a great cast of Jack Black, Dustin Hoffman, Angelina Jolie, Seth Rogen, Lucy Liu, and more. Both have stellar animation that perfectly walks the line between hyper-stylization and great comedic expressions. Both have great soundtracks, and both tell great stories. So why is it the second one that's better? Hard to say, but it mainly lies in the non-recurring features. For starters, the villain. In the first movie, it's Tai Lung, voiced by Ian McShane. In the second one, it's Shen, voiced by Gary Oldman. In all honesty, Shen is the better villain. Also, it's Gary Oldman, come on. The fact that he has a more personal connection with Poe makes him all the more despicable, and Gary Oldman is simply a great choice to voice a character like this. But that connection with Po is the true strength of the movie, because it's what allows us to learn more about him. The first movie's great, but its focus of the more dramatic moments come just as much from Shifu and his relationship with Tai Lung, which can work, but in order to truly tug on our heartstrings, that more intimate connection with Po is needed. This is a movie that has made people cry during the saddest moments, and yet that's not a stretch to imagine. It's strange to see something like that come out of a movie about a talking panda voiced by Jack Black. But at the same time, not judging book by its cover is kind of the message the movie's trying to send. Some people criticize this movie for being too similar to the original, but I don't really see it. The aforementioned shift in focus from Shifu to Po already helps tremendously with that, and this is also the good kind of sequel that doesn't reset everything. Po doesn't spend half the movie trying to earn the respect of the Furies 5, no, they start out at that point and build from there. Po's friendship with Tigress is interesting, and it feels very genuine, and that is a pretty good word to sum up this movie. Genuine. The writing, the emotions, the animation, all of them are classified by that, and it makes for a great movie that earns this spot on the list. Number 3, The Prince of Egypt. The sleeper option on this list, and honestly I wouldn't blame you for not expecting this one so high up, but it deserves to be here. While adapting something as important to so many people as the Bible should be treated with great care, doing so in a Disney-style animated musical might not seem like the most logical option to everyone at first, and yet it works. The reason behind that is that this movie knew where to put the focus. It's not a story of the Hebrews versus the Egyptians or Jehovah versus the Egyptian gods. What this is, when you boil it down all the way, is a tale of two brothers who grow up as best friends, but as adults face each other as enemies. Adapting books is never easy, but by choosing to ground this epic story of the Book of Exodus in the relationship between the brothers, it's such a humanizing factor. Moses and Ramses play off each other perfectly, both when they're young and when they've grown up. When Moses comes back and tells his brother why, you can really see the heartbreak this causes them both, that both of them wish things could be different, go back to the way they were. It means that even if you aren't religious, it's still a great movie because it tells the story of great characters. The voice cast of this movie is an absolute who's who of big names. Val Kilmer, Ralph Fiennes, Michelle Pfeiffer, Sandra Bullock, Jeff Goldblum, Danny Glover, Steve Martin, Martin Short, Patrick Stewart, and Helen Mirren are all here, and that's not even the entire cast. How on earth did they have so much money for such a star-studded cast, and yet there was plenty left for the script and to work out this incredible animation? Kilmer voiced both Moses and God. You could read something interesting into that, given that God only speaks to Moses, of course. Fiennes does an incredible job as Ramses, going from young and brash, maybe even arrogant, to confident and authoritative as Pharaoh. Ramesses is a great villain and honestly very underappreciated on the best villains list. He's complex, and the fact that his relationship with Moses is the focus of the movie really allows him to shine. Even better than that, we don't get one great villain from this movie, we get two. Patrick Stewart as Pharaoh Seti leaves such an impact, even though he's only in the first act of the movie. There's no question that what he does is evil. He ordered the deaths of hundreds of newborns, for crying out loud, but he's not cartoonishly evil. We need more villains like this. The last thing I want to bring up is how good the music is. The idea of turning the Book of Exodus into a musical might seem weird to some, but it really works. Particularly the intro song, Deliver Us, and later The Plagues, really highlight why movie musicals can be great. They tell the story in musical form while either introducing or developing the characters and story as a musical should. All of these factors combined make this easily one of DreamWorks' best movies, along with one of their most underrated ones. If you haven't seen it, you definitely won't regret watching it. Number 2, Shrek 2. This might stir a little controversy. Why not the first one? Well, if this was a list of the most influential DreamWorks movies, the first Shrek would be on the number 1 spot, no contest. But best and influential are not synonymous, and the truth is, Shrek 2 is the funnier movie. Much like Kung Fu Panda 2, this is the good kind of sequel, one that picks up where its predecessor left off, and rather than trying to reset the status quo, it expands its world and continues to develop its characters. The relationship of Shrek and Fiona is fascinating, and does a great job of implementing real issues into this otherwise fantastical world. But they try to work through their issues. It's not just conflict for the sake of having conflict. Shrek doesn't look like himself for half the movie, which is a gutsy move, but it's also an integral part of the story. It's a great demonstration that he does really love Fiona, and this is why the relationship is so great. The first Shrek set the benchmark for animated satire, and the second one really recognized why the first one worked so well and builds on that. So now you have not only more characters, they also use this opportunity to work in more of that great satire. The kingdom of far, far away being like Beverly Hills, a tavern called the Poison Apple where all the great fairy tale villains meet. It's just so creative. Speaking of, between this and the previous 2 entries on this list, I'm really starting to think that Dreamworks doesn't get enough credit for how well they can write a villain. The fairy godmother is a great one. Her plan is subtle but diabolical, and she doesn't just have one that's set in stone, she adjusts her plans as the situation evolves so that she can still come out on top. That's what a great villain should be like. This movie also has one of the best climaxes of all time, being equal parts exciting, moving, funny, and it's all set to a kick-ass song. This is how a movie should end, and it honestly doesn't get enough credit for what it is. So while I have great respect for the first Shrek, Shrek 2 took everything that was good about its predecessor and turned it up to 11. It's funnier, it's more exciting, and with it being such a polished experience, it's well deserving of the number 2 spot on this list. Hey, this is where host Adrian is taking over. I personally like Shrek 1 better, but I respect the decisions of the scriptwriter to put Shrek 2 in this spot. But again, my personal opinion, I like Shrek 1 better. Number 1. How to Train Your Dragon. Yeah, you all saw this one coming, no need to act surprised. So it might be a bit of an obvious pick for the number 1 spot, but at the same time, it's an obvious pick for a very good reason. The funny thing is though, if you want to ask why this movie is so good, that's not the easiest question in the world to answer. The story is pretty familiar to anyone who's ever seen a children's movie. Boy has a pet, parent village doesn't like pet ends up saving the day. There's also a little bit of Liar revealed sprinkled in there, just in case none of this was familiar enough already. So why does it work so well? The answer probably lies in the pacing, because that aspect of this movie is second to none. Everything is paced to perfection. Yes, Hiccup seems like a bit of a standard protagonist, but you're given time to get to know him, and his introduction leaves no question about who he is. He is the odd one out, but at the same time, not without merit. The first thing shown about him is that he makes up for his physical weakness with his wits and engineering skills, even if it does need work. But it's not just him. Every named character is like this. It would have been so easy for the movie to make his father stoic just a bully, who's angry that his son doesn't follow tradition, but he gets room to air his feelings as well, and those aren't unfounded. And what I said about Spirit, it being a good decision to not have the animals talk, well, that's true here as well. Though with Hiccup as the main character, it's slightly less necessary. But they still manage to give Toothless a ton of personality, even if he basically is a cat with wings. The fact that they give him a character arc as well once again comes back to the pacing, which is pretty much perfect. How to Train Your Dragon was also one of the first major movies to be released in 3D after James Cameron's Avatar hit hard with it. And truth be told, this one holds up a lot better. Animation really lends itself to 3D very well, and this movie takes full advantage of it, especially with the flying scenes. You have long, sweeping shots really making you feel like you're there. If there was ever a movie to buy another ticket for if it comes out in IMAX 3D near you, this is the one. One thing I haven't mentioned yet is the incredible music score. It really is a mystery why this one lost out at the Academy Awards to The Social Network. It's a great soundtrack to put on in the background when you're trying to work, like for example, writing a script about the best Dreamworks movies. The one thing I can say against this movie is that the title leaves something to be desired, but that's because it's technically an adaptation from a book. And still, if that's my biggest complaint about the movie, that means there should be no question about the fact that this is the very best that Dreamworks has to offer. There you go, the best of Dreamworks movies. Do you agree with our choices? And what's your favorite? I'm Adrian, thank you for watching. Do be sure to let us know in the comments below, and while you're there, like and subscribe for more great content every week. And remember, Frederator loves you.